I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um, um, okay, I'm done with my predictions. I'm done with my upsets. Basically, upsets and everything else in between. So, guys, I only comment on topics that I feel strongly about. And this one is one of them, right? Um, should I wait for people to come on or just think about the people who are going to watch this after? Uh, well, it's a couple of seconds, so let's wait a little bit. Please bear with me if you're watching this after I'm done with my live. Yo, I hope the network is not, sabotaging me because I feel like there's a problem. Where are these people? Guys, I'm waiting for you. Come. Okay, let me just start. Um, Here's my thing about this whole topic, right? So, for those who don't know basically what's happening, I don't know where you are because it's all over the internet. So, there's a card in Saudi Arabia, somewhere in Saudi Arabia. Um, where is it specifically? Okay, but somewhere in Saudi Arabia. There's a card that's going to be headlined by Cory Sanhagen versus Umar Nomagomedov. And the co-main event is um, I think it's Nick Diaz versus who? There's someone who's fighting Nick Diaz, but this is not important. And then also Tony Ferguson is facing someone else on the very same card. All right. So before I get to that particular point, there are people who are complaining about Umar getting a fight against Corey Sanhagen. So maybe let me give my thoughts on that a little bit before I get into the Nick Diaz versus Tony Ferguson situation. I honestly don't understand MMA fans, man. Like they complain that Umar is busy fighting cans, and then when he's thrown into the wolves, basically, and is given a top five contender, they're like he doesn't deserve it. Like it's crazy. I think I've addressed this before, but I don't want to get too much into that particular topic. So let me get to the actual topic, or rather the headline or the title of this particular video, which is Tony Ferguson versus Nick Diaz. A lot of fans, after the fights, their separate fights were announced. A lot of fans are not happy. A lot of fans are complaining. Basically, they're saying, well, why didn't they match them up? Why isn't Nick Diaz fighting Tony Ferguson? They are both in their 40s. They are both at the end of their careers. They both have not looked so good in their previous fights. To prospects, basically Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. Why are they giving them to these particular fighters who are going to essentially beat them? And why aren't they facing each other? So for me, I look at it from the UFC's perspective, right? Tony Ferguson, number one, does not want to retire. So in my opinion, if Nick Diaz and Tony Ferguson fight, Tony Ferguson is going to win that fight, right? And what's that going to do? It's going to tell Tony Ferguson that he still has the ability to continue fighting because he won a fight, you know? And because of that, the Tony Ferguson is not going to retire. So essentially, a win between the both of them, let's say, for example, Nick Diaz and Tony Ferguson actually fight, either whoever wins between the both of them, it won't do anything for the division basically, because they're at the end of their careers and they get to, obviously everyone wants them to ride off into the sunset, but look at Tony Ferguson's last fight and look at Nick Diaz's last fight. Nick Diaz literally gave up in that fight. Like he wasn't just beaten, he actually gave up in that fight. Right? Look at Tony Ferguson. I mean, Tony Ferguson tried to actually win that fight. So at the very least, we can give him that. He didn't get finished by Paddy Pimblett, even though like he was basically dominated in that particular fight. I actually thought that Tony Ferguson would be able to beat Paddy Pimblett, but nonetheless he was dominated. But at the very least, he wasn't finished. Nick Diaz actually gave up in that particular fight, right? So in this, the way that the UFC has set it up, and that's why in the beginning I was like, I'm looking at it from the UFC's perspective, right? So if they match up Tony Ferguson versus and Nick Diaz with Vicente Luque and Michael Chiesa, what that does for the division is Vicente Luque will have a win against a popular fighter, and he will have basically a win. That's the most important thing. Similarly with Michael Chiesa, that will then go down to whoever they match up Michael Chiesa with or Vicente Luque with. For example, if they want to build up Rinat Fakhretdinov, I think Rinat Fakhretdinov is in the rankings in the welterweight division, for example, right? If they want to build up someone like Rinat Fakhretdinov, they can put him against someone who, for example, beat Tony Ferguson. And the fight will have some level of hype. Look at what beating Conor McGregor did for Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier was popular, but not as popular. He was even complaining about money before he fought Conor McGregor. And now Dustin Poirier is one of the most popular fighters in the UFC. In fact, on my channel, Dustin Poirier's videos are the highest, on the short section, Dustin Poirier's videos are the highest in terms of numbers. So fighting someone who's a little bit popular to some extent affects your popularity as well. So them actually fighting this, but it does something for the division, as opposed to two popular legends fighting each other, and then their win will not do anything for the division, basically. One of them gets to win and ride off into the sunset, but I doubt that's going to happen because I heard Nick Diaz is trying to fight Colby Covington or whatever the case is, and which doesn't really make sense to me. Or Tony Ferguson wins and then he thinks he still has it and wants more fights and then gets more brain damage. That's what's going to happen, basically. So to me, it doesn't really make sense for MMA fans to say, we want Tony Ferguson and Nick Diaz to fight, and then at the same time say we want Tony Ferguson and Nick Diaz to retire. They are not going to willingly retire. I mean, Nick Diaz makes a lot of money from just fighting once. I think he makes close to $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. He makes a lot of money just from fighting. One fight makes him a lot of money. And I'm assuming Tony Ferguson, even if he's not at that point or at that level of making money, I'm sure he's making a lot of money. So if you give them the confidence to say, well, I want to fight, what's going to happen? They are going to get more brain damage. So I feel like the UFC made these fights in order to make sure that their star power somehow remains in the division and will go on to whoever they are trying to build. Whoever they match up Michael Chiesa with in his next fight, whoever they match up Vicente Luque with in his next fight, it will have a little bit more hype, and it will then somehow go back into the division and build the division further. You know, obviously the UFC have invested money into these particular fighters, and that's why they became as popular as they did. Obviously, it also has to do with them, their personality and their fighting styles, but a large proportion of that is because the UFC invested in them. So I feel like it's only fair that they also leave a portion of their star power and their drawing power with the division, so that the division can actually benefit from who they are at that particular point in time. And at the same time, it forces them to retire. Because if they don't feel like if they don't feel like they no longer have it, or rather, if they still feel like I have it, you know, what do you think will happen? You know, what do you think will happen? Do you think Tony Ferguson will say, "Well, I just beat Nick Diaz, so I'm going to retire and be happy, and I'm done with my career"? No, that's not going to happen. He's going to think he still has it, and he's going to try and continue fighting. That's my 2 cents on the topic. As far as the fight card, I mean, the fight card is good. I feel like there are a lot of people who should retire on that particular card. There are only two, three fights that I feel like are really exciting, which is Marlon Vera and Davison Figueiredo. That's an interesting fight. Obviously, Corey Sanhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov is interesting. The Mackenzie Dern fight, I mean, I'm on the fence about it, but I guess it's still good. But a lot of the fights are not that interesting. I feel like this particular card is top heavy. I don't understand why, but as long as we get great matches. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents. If you're new to the channel, just go through the whole entire channel from shorts to community section to videos. There's a lot on the channel. It's an MMA UFC basically channel. So go through it. I think you'll love what you see, especially in the live section of the channel. I love and appreciate all of you guys. See you next time. Deuces.